I was Air Force. Started out as a GS-3. Then by the time I ended my career, I was a GS-12. Our particular base was 26,000 people. I had to manage fairly large budget, between 100,000 and 150,000. I could say, I really want this company to come in and do this. He'd say one word and I knew who it was. And I'm like, I know about your product. If I wanted your product, I'd be calling you. I want to minimize those frustrations.
All my amazing GovCon winners, we have another amazing interview for you. Well, I am here with Mrs. Karen Blackwell, who most importantly is not a Karen. So that's number one. I want to make that very clear. She is not a Karen. She was our contracting officer representative eons ago. Seems like eons, but it really wasn't. More importantly, her last government job, she was a community support coordinator. You're going to love what she has to share because she's been there, done that, the government side. So welcome, Karen. Welcome to the channel.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
I'm excited too. So talk to us as far as like, where are you located? How did you get into like the government? How did you start working for the government?
That's kind of the funny part because I tell people all the time, I never even knew anybody in the military. It was kind of an unusual story. I mean, I had family members that served, but it was long before I was born. And so my ex-husband actually said he wanted to fly. He wanted to be in the Air Force. So he decided to join the Air Force and he said, we're getting stationed in Oklahoma. And I cried because I didn't even know where Oklahoma was. So I came to Oklahoma and the teaching jobs at the time were only about $14,000 a year. In Wyoming, it was about $18,000. And so I'm like, no, I don't know if I want to teach and get started and do all that. So I actually got a job as a preschool teacher initially. And I was in the area where I was working and I had a gentleman. He made a general mad. He would not put in a steam room in the gym. And so they hid him out at the youth center and I got to know him and he found out I had a degree in physical education. And he said, well, let me tell you, I have a job opening up. And if you go to this particular site, you could take a test. Back then you had to take a test to get a government job. So I took a test and I interviewed for him. And let's say that was just history. Started out as a GS-3. Then by the time I ended my career, I was a GS-12. And every job I went into, I was asked to take the job. I didn't have to interview again until I interviewed for my last job because they just figured out a way to put me in the job because they thought I was a good fit for it.
Which is very similar to government contracting as far as when you find I would imagine when you find a company you enjoy working with, you figure out a way to make it work.
Absolutely. And I like rules. I like regulations, but I also know that sometimes you have to kind of look around different situations to be able to make it fit. And so that's why I was excited that I did that course for you all because, to do critical thinking, that's just my thing. That is absolutely my thing. And so I always was able to talk to people and figure out a way to do it a little bit different within the rules and just be able to get the job done. And I think they recognize that in me. And so leading up to my last job where I worked for the installation commander, resolving installation issues, dealing with people just in that area. But I think that was one of the things that I knew that I was using every strength I had. So I love Gallup strength. It just used all my top 5 strengths. If you're not familiar with it, please go take it because it's absolutely amazing to learn what you were about and just enhance those strengths.
It definitely is. And given what I know about your last role, it's a very important role. So talk to us about how that role involved working with government contractors.
So I will tell you, anytime I had to work with finance or government contracting, I was not a happy camper. I'm just going to put it out there. I am number dyslexic. I don't like numbers. I had to do a budget. I had to manage fairly large budget. I really relied on my acquisition people and my finance people to get me through, but I understood what I needed. And I think that's the biggest thing I had to really communicate is I had to figure out, okay, this is what I need need. This is what's going to work, and really put that detail in. And it takes a lot of conversation with the contracting officer as well as your finance people. It takes a lot of conversation with them because they have a different mindset. And so you as a customer, you have to come in really trying to understand their world and be able to communicate exactly what you need in order to get that contract rolling. Because if you get into a contract and it's not meeting your needs, it's going to be a year before you can do anything about it, unless it's one of those short-term contracts. And so for me, I really put a lot of effort, a lot of work. So sometimes I think it could be frustrating for someone on the other end, like in your audience, to say, oh my gosh, why is it taking so long? Why is it taking so long?
Yeah.
I learned early on, I tried to get anything that I wanted to do that I knew was a need, because we had a pattern, we had a trend on the installation. For instance, mental health first aid is something we brought there because of mental health challenges. It could be D&I, a diversity and inclusion event. Any of those things, we really tried to start way ahead of time, because a lot of times money will drop at the end of the year and you have to be ready. And so I was really good about picking up other people's money. It was free money. So I would make sure that I had everything in order way ahead of time, even if I knew I didn't have the money, so that I could have it sitting there, and at a drop of a hat, my contracting officer says, oh, Karen's already given this to me, let's roll. And there was a lot of times I got great opportunities that way and got my contracts for different events I wanted.
And you said you manage a sizable budget. Could you just share, like, what kind of numbers are we talking about?
So most generally, it was between 100,000 and 150,000. And so what I was tasked with is anything of all of our helping agencies, and that would include like the chapel, the sexual assault prevention office, our airmen and family readiness, the mental health clinic. We were tasked with coming together and figuring out different issues. And the reason why they had that community support coordinator, because that person was bringing all of the issues together in one, because, you know, sometimes you might have individuals go to one agency and another agency, and you never know how big the problem is until you come together as a group. And so that position was created. I was the very first one at Tinker. It was challenging. It was exciting, but we didn't know really what we were supposed to be doing. You know, so it was like we kind of invented ourselves as we went along. And then, you know, eventually the money came and it was like, okay, so what are we going to do with this money? You know, so you really had to have everything in order, tell people, yes, this is an issue. This is something we need. So you had to have a lot of justification, and that takes a while too. That definitely takes a while. So if somebody ever talks to somebody, says, hey, yeah, I'm trying to get a contract for this, you know, it could be 6 months down the road before that person could get everything together that they needed.
Wow, 6 months.
Yeah. And that's if you got the funding. A lot of my agencies didn't have a lot of funding. So that's a lot of times they would come to me and they would say, okay, we could use this with this agency, this agency, this agency. So I was able to pay for it because there's multiple agencies that needed it. A lot of times I took a few shortcuts. I would go through our education and training office, and as long as I could label it as training, I could sometimes pick and choose the training I wanted. So as long as it was under a certain amount of money, because I had a government purchase card, if it was under $25,000, I could actually write up a justification and I could say, I really want this company to come in and do this class. And so I was able to do that sometimes as well, which saved some time because then I didn't even go through contracting.
How did you learn about, let's say, one of those companies that you were like, okay, that's somebody I want to bring here? How would you typically have learned about them?
A lot of times it was from other bases. For me personally, our base was a part of 8 other bases. I think we were 8 altogether, Air Force Material Command. And so we talked a lot. We would get together once a year for conferences, that type of thing. And so we would talk even in between there. If someone had a really great experience with a particular business bringing in a training, then we kind of would get on board and say, hey, how did you do that? Who did you contact? All of that. There's times that we were called by different companies. And I will tell you, the one thing that just for me, I'm not going to speak for every CSC out there, but when you've been in the government long enough, you got to the point where you knew when someone someone was very genuine about what they did in their company versus someone that was trying to get information out of you to find some way to get into getting another contract at a different base. They would find out what the latest trends were. They'd say, oh, I heard about this community support coordinator or this community, they would throw the language out there of what they've heard. And I will tell you, I was one of those type of people that I want someone that's going to come in and they were going to really find value in helping our 1% that serve in the military and help those DoD employees that help that 1%. And I think that's the people that are going to get repeat customers. Those are the individuals that are going to really see some growth because people know the difference. They know the difference between someone being genuine and someone that's just out to get a government contract for money.
Yeah, they definitely do, which speaks volumes to the power of reputation.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. I will tell you, when I went to Alabama, I'm like, I'm representing KPC. I need to...
And Karen is speaking to, she recently did subcontracting. She did perform some training for my flagship company. So that's the other side of all of this. Just for everyone's background, like this was never intended, right? It's just we won some work, went about our business, and then I'd heard Karen retired and she's been living life, spending time with her grandson and everything and all of that. And so an opportunity came up. And so Lori Davis, who runs everything with my businesses, she immediately thought of Karen. She thought of you. And so the flip side is you can also potentially partner, subcontract with those who have retired from the federal government. And so it was amazing because she hit a home run. Now they want a bunch of additional training because of that. She was also just speaking to representing us, because that's the other thing is regardless of what type of services or products you provide or whoever's doing it for you, they represent your business. If we had somebody at the Air Force Base bothering Karen, it would have been like, oh my gosh, why are we working with them? She would have been thinking about, how do I get rid of them? She would have been like, when is this year up?
Absolutely.
Right. So it's just something to put out there, but it's such a blessing because you just did such a great job. And I'm looking forward to doing more and more with you. And also tell us, what are some things that you would also look for in a small business?
Well, I think that was one of the biggest things that, I really clicked with Lori, because I was used to having an exercise physiologist in my work area that was my government employee. So early on, when I was under the medical community, I was running a health and wellness center. They kept bouncing back and forth a lot in the medical community between a contractor versus a GS employee. And even within our center, they jumped all the time. So I was actually a GS exercise physiologist, and they decided to do away with it, and they decided to make it a contractor. And so one of the things that's a little bit different with personal service contract, and we did this with a dietitian as well, we basically are the day-to-day operators. I mean, they run leave through us. You make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. I mean, they are working for you daily. And one of the things I tried to always emphasize, and I saw this in good organizations on the installation, is that a contractor is treated just like everybody else. And not everybody does that. And it's changed. It depends on the atmosphere. It depends on the culture. And it varies from base to base. It's not going to be the same everywhere. But for the medical community, it was more about, we're all here to do one job. Because as service contracts, we can say, hey, you need to be doing this, you need to do that within those parameters, which is different than if I was on a shop floor for a contractor that was working, turning a wrench, because it's going to be all about production with them. Right? So service contracts are a little bit easier because we really have a window into who is this employee that's going to sit with me. And so we work with that company to hire somebody and hire that person that we know is going to be good for us and work well with us. And sometimes it's good to have someone that has been part of the government, and sometimes it's not. sometimes it's good to see that fresh eyes on what they see that's different, the groupthink that goes on when you have veterans and you have active duty and you have DoD civilians that have been around for 30 years. And so I didn't necessarily always, go straight to someone that has government experience, but they have to be willing to learn and understand that culture because it's very different. And so that's what I really appreciated when Lori and I worked together to do a couple exercise physiologists. That's what we did. I mean, we looked at what was the best fit, and we actually got three great people actually. One of them ended up getting a GS job, so we had to start all over. And that process is not easy. So I appreciate Lori's patience with me with that because I don't make that decision. And so I really wanted to get the best candidate. And so her and I really worked a lot on communicating the interviews and what my reservations were, what her reservations were. So it worked very, very well. Happy to say that we still got one that I did hire. So she's been around a while. Yeah. And then the other part of it is, does that contract give enough incentives within that company to make me feel like that my employee I'm getting to know is actually being treated well? Because if they're not getting treated well and there's a contractor that's taking a third of the money away from that individual that's doing the work, and I'm the one as a government employee that I'm the one managing their leave, I'm the one that's making sure they're there at work, that can be a lot of heartburn if they are not taking care of that employee and making that person happy to want to stay. Because like I said, the interview process to rehire someone is not easy. It takes a while. And in the meantime, somebody else has got to pick up the slack. So the happier that person is, the happier that company can make that contractor, the longer they're going to stay and the easier it is on that government agency.
Definitely.
It's kind of long-winded answer to the question.
No, this is great.
I got on my soapbox.
No, but this is great because, I never worked for the government. So it's great to be able to hear these things so that when someone's looking at opportunities and they see exercise physiologist or religious position or training and it's on site, that you immediately think of Karen, that there is a government counterpart who is relying on this person. So you want to make sure they're treated well, because if not, then Karen's going to be frustrated and it just turns into a horrible situation. Ultimately, you could lose the work.
Absolutely, because the reason why we have contracts in the first place is because we don't have the money for a GS employee. We don't have the money for a DoD employee. And so there's so many different pots of money with the government. So when you get that pot of money that you can have a contract, if it doesn't work out, that money could go away. And then you have to absorb all of that work to try to do it. And that's very frustrating that you have to worry about that all the time. Yeah, that's one part I don't miss about the government. I'm glad I'm retired from that. I don't have to worry about that anymore.
What kind of, because you talked about a little bit with training, what other type of personnel contracts were you involved in throughout your career?
Like I said, we had that dietitian and we also had an exercise physiologist. The other times they work with contractors is to bring in training. So a lot of times we would have a very specific issue, and it's a lot of communication with not only your people on your installation. I would hear from active duty members, maybe they were stationed somewhere else and they would say, hey, I just did this great training. Do you think you could bring it to the installation? Or my commander might even say that. He might say, hey, I had this training at this installation. I really want to bring it to Tinker. Can you make it happen? And so we would talk about that a lot because I was always about, it's okay if I bring in a training and maybe I have 300 people that get to participate in that training. But where I really try to do my bread and butter is if there's a course that I can train some people on the installation to actually deliver the training to. So there's another opportunity to have some facilitator trainings that generally, I would try to bring them to the installation versus send somebody somewhere else. So that was really great. We would bring in these trainers for different things. I'm sure people are familiar with True Colors. So we would do True Colors or mental health first aid. So we'd bring them in and we'd train people to be facilitators, and then we would just send them out across the installation. And so those of you not familiar, our particular base was 26,000 people that worked there. But we had between contractors, active duty, civilians, and retirees, it probably equated out to about 85,000 total that could come to the installation and participate in different events. Yeah, just a small base.
And it's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people.
wow, it's like so telling because again, shows the power of word of mouth.
Absolutely.
You do an amazing job and someone's, hey, did you hear about, and I mean, even True Colors, I've heard about that type of training going way back.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that I think about as a facilitator all the time. Not that I'm not going to go out but I'm very conscious of making sure that I understand that installation. So for instance, the one I did, I think this is important. So if you hire somebody to be a facilitator as part of a contract, the more professional they are, the more accommodating they are, the more you try to help individuals. So for instance, that point of contact, I don't like to just show up that day of anyways, but getting in early the day before, meeting with that POC, making sure that everything is ready, everything is prepared. Something little. I mean, this is where it was hard for me because I'm used to giving little incentive items, having prizes, all these. I'm like, okay, Karen, you have to stay under $20. They can't accept anything over $20. So, I'm trying to think of these things of what I can do for these people to have that special touch. It was amazing to me because I was able to do that from the still serve my people, but from the contracting side. And I think we have to have that mentality in order to make sure we're having that connection and making sure that we're taking care of them. The amount of hours we spent on that curriculum, it was what was needed. I had to do a lot of research. I did not understand a lot of information. I had to talk to people. I had to, I was very upfront. I'm a very honest person too. As a contractor, I can't go into the same systems they can go into and find the information. So I have to use my critical thinking skills to Google and say, okay, does this sound right? But even in the class, I could use it as a teaching moment. Okay, let's use our critical thinking skills. Karen does have a CAC card. She can't get in your systems. So what are you going to do to make sure this link is an appropriate link for you?
Right.
Well, I'm going to go with my systems and I'm going to make sure that this is the latest copy of this regulation. So we talked about that. And so there's ways to make it teaching moments, even if you have limitations yourself, but it's being willing to go that extra mile with them. And it paid off in dividends. The looks on their faces to reduce their anxiety because they have a huge test they have to take in order to be acquisition specialists. And if they fail that test, they lose their job. And they didn't even want to take the test. They were procrastinating. So I don't know, Kinsey, if you've heard of Eat the Frog, but that was the whole thing through the whole course is eat the frog. I'm going to do this. I'm going to get it done. I'm starting with this first. And so it really resonated with them, but it reduced that anxiety and it really helped them meet them where they were at and get them to the next level.
And you being able to come from the perspective of being in the government space, being retired, and then quickly transitioning to, okay, I'm also now a contractor. Okay, I'm aware, can't do anything over $20. And to all of the things that you like that contractors did with you, having the meetings, meeting ahead of time, doing your due diligence, knowing the information, and it all pays off because then they take notice. No different than the companies that are out there. We all pretty much use toothpaste, I hope, but some toothpaste brands are better than the others. And the same thing for government contracting. And so you beyond best represented KPC, and you're just an amazing person, it shined through. And then you add on top of it that stress of it's a job contingent test and they're freaking out because they know they don't pass it. Then what? That they're already going through the things like, I've explained it to my spouse and what am I going to tell my family and what other job am I going to use? Like they're totally freaking out. And the fact that you could just recognize you resonated, those are the things that government agencies love because it wasn't, I'm just coming in here to do a training. It's been great. Can't wait to get paid and do another one. Nobody wants it.
Well, even if you don't have my type of experience, like you said, you could hire someone subcontract. Know that that's not your strength. Hire someone else that is doing the same kind of work. And believe me, from generals down to airmen, there's those people out there that did that work in the government and now they're not in the government. So they're available. They're out there with their own companies or, they're looking for work. But the other part of it is even if you don't have that experience, listening to the people in the audience, learn a little bit on Google about their organization. I was Air Force. I didn't know anything about Army. So I went online. What does Army Arsenal do? What do they do? How are they structured? Ask questions because you just taking an interest in them is showing that you care about doing a good job. And I think that resonates very much so. I found out that the gentleman that was in charge of the building, he was an old tank commander. I'm saying that because that's what he called himself. Our point of contact introduced me to him because, it's his building. So she introduced me and said, the course that I was teaching. And he looked at me and he said, "Oh, the ones that want round tables and tablecloths with ice water." I did not know that was the request, but I looked at him and I said, "Well, this girl doesn't need round tables, tablecloths, and ice water, so we'll be okay." And I just told him, I said, "Well, a lot of people don't know the different ways that education and training operates and what the situation is. It's not in, a lot of the event centers, clubs that we would have round tables, tablecloths, ice water, they basically got out of business. So these event centers, when we set them up, we have to bring our own tablecloths. We have to do our own thing." It was interesting, but he's the one that stopped me afterwards and asked what else you all could do for them. So you can meet people where they are and get them to different levels. But yes, he asked me a lot of questions. He talked to me for 30 minutes. And I said, and Alyssa had Lori's number. I'm sure they would welcome us doing another course, doing it for another population. I'm sure it would be perfectly good that we could do that. So, but like I said, I wasn't around Army that much, but I understood a little bit more just from the people I did know. That just goes a long way. So you just got to get to know people and listen and understand it and really, really be able to show them that you care about them as an organization and you're there to fulfill that need that they can't fill with a government employee.
Yeah. Adding to that, the fact that you were so flexible and that you shared with him, like, yeah, of course, reach out to Lori. That is why we'll continue working with you. Because one of the mistakes that those we sub, we team, mistake that they'll make is, oh, I got to get more. So instead of, oh, contact Lori or contact KPC, it's, oh yeah, here's my business card or here's this book that I offer. And we've had situations, because usually they're very explicit that you can't come in there and market. And so we've had people that we can no longer work with because they tried to market. And it's like a mindset thing. Like, if we asked you to be part of this to begin with, why wouldn't we ask you to do it again? We're not going to say no. So this is a really good tip, because Karen did exactly what was needed and what you want, because then if not, it would have turned into a whole situation and then they may have not worked with either of us because they would have thought, oh gosh, she's so pushy.
That's come back to my point with my experience has been with someone's called me on the phone and they were like, I had one guy in particular and it was a product. It wasn't somebody who was providing a service, but he'd say one word and I knew who it was. And I would start to memorize when he was going to call me, because it would always be around when they would find out when we would get money. And I'm like, geez, I know about your product. If I wanted your product, I'd be calling you. But I did have some speakers that were the same way. They're very pushy. They might even give me their free book and those types of things. But, there's a lot of individuals out there like me. We have no desire to do all the paperwork that KPC does. No desire, none whatsoever. In fact, I'll have people say, well, you can make a lot more money if you just did this on your own. I'm like, I don't have any desire to. I am semi-retired. I enjoy getting back to the DoD community. I love jumping back in there and spending time with them and jumping back out and being retired again. I enjoy that. I want to spend time with my family. I spent so many years doing so much overtime, so much comp time, taking away from my family, almost like a military member, that I have no desire to jump back in there and spend so much time working on those types of things. I'm not a salesperson. Everybody says I am, but I'm not a marketing salesperson like you would picture. I'm very passionate about what I do, and I will show that in a classroom. I will show that in different places, but they already paid for it. I don't have to sell them anything. But I enjoyed especially being able to impart to these brand new DoD employees exactly what my experience has been. So it saves them a little bit of heartache, a little bit of frustration. I guess that's mostly my passion, whether I'm teaching DoD or wherever I'm teaching. I want to minimize those frustrations, minimize people struggling so much if I already know how to help them and I have that knowledge to impart to them. That's just a gift that I know I already have. No matter whether I do this for money or don't do it for money, it's always going to be there because that's a gift God gave me. So I just have to realize that. And it's hard work. It can be very hard work to be a good facilitator. Very hard work.
You're an excellent facilitator. All of your hard work, your preparation, just your passion and love for being a teacher, it pays off. And that's also what's needed for those of you watching, that when you're looking for someone to provide services, you want someone like Karen. You don't want just someone who's like, okay, because then that's the vibe everyone's going to get. So I'm very fortunate and blessed to be able to have you as part of the KPC teams, and then to be able to have you here with all my amazing GovCon winners. And so, Mrs. Karen, how can people contact you?
So they can contact me as KarenBlackwell22@gmail.com. They can email me if they have any questions, concerns. I don't have any problem. They want to reach out and just ask me questions. And within the scope that I know, more than willing to help people with whatever they have questions about.
I am just so honored and so grateful to you for being here today. And for all of you who are watching and stayed until the end, make sure you hit the notification button, hit the like button, share, and go to profitablecontracts.co if you haven't already. And until next time, everything is possible.